This is my 35th policy conference. A lot has changed in the last 35 years, but one thing that hasn't is the spirit and the energy of AIPAC. There is a reason that Israel is called the startup nation. Its innovation footprint is felt globally. Today, there are 6,000 startups in Israel. That's one startup for every 1,600 people, and the highest density of startups of any other country. Israel is topping global innovation rankings year after year, and Israeli companies are attracting more venture per capita than any other country. Over the next 70 years, in an era of accelerating technological change, innovation and ingenuity will be more vital to Israel's story than ever before. Here to discuss the past, present, and future of Israeli innovation is someone who has been at the center of Israel's tech ecosystem for over 2 decades. He was tapped by Google to set up their operation in Israel and turned Google Israel into an innovation powerhouse for one of the world's biggest companies. He now manages Google's presence in Europe, Middle Eastern and African emerging markets. This is a region that covers over 70 countries, 20% of the world's population, and 30% of internet growth. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Vice President of Google, Meir Brand. Good to see you. Meir, thanks for joining us today.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for inviting me back. It's a real pleasure, the opportunity to speak in front of such a wonderful audience that I have so much in common with, including my 2 biggest passions in life, Israel and tech.
Oh, that's great. So I want to start by asking you this about the growing presence of multinational tech companies in Israel. You last appeared on this stage at AIPAC, 2010. At the time, there were about 150 multinationals with R&D centers operating in Israel. Today, there's over 300 and several hundred innovation labs as well. That's a lot of big companies flocking to one small country. What are all these companies doing setting shop in Israel, and why is Google in Israel?
Yeah, I think you said part of it in your question. You know, Israel has really become a hotbed of innovation, probably second only to Silicon Valley in the US. So I think that's the reason they all came there. But Israel has also matured, and in the past 8 years, it's not only the volume or the amount of new R&D centers, it's really the types of industries that are looking for innovation in Israel. You know, in the past, 8 years ago, it was mainly the tech center. So you would see the usual suspects like Google and Apple and Microsoft and Facebook and all those folks. But in the past 8 years, we're seeing new industries that are looking into tapping into the Israeli innovation. Financial institutions like JP Morgan, if you look at fast-moving consumer goods, companies like P&G and Coke are opening shop in Israel. If you look at the automotive industry, you have General Motors and you have Mercedes-Benz, all of them opening innovation shops in Israel. So I think that's kind of one thing. The other thing I would say, Wendy, is really the maturity. So we're seeing Startup Nation mature. And you see that, you know, if you look at the 80s, we had only less than a handful of companies that are unicorns. meaning companies valued at over $1 billion. Now, we have more than 20 of those.
Amazing.
So Israel is maturing, and Startup Nation is maturing. And lastly, I'd just say from a personal note, Google has been maturing with Startup Nation. When I opened up shop there, it was 2005. I was the first person on the ground, and now you have more than 1,000 people in Google Israel. And it's a great testimony not only for the success of Google, but really for the strength of Startup Nation.
So actually, on that note about Google in Israel, what role does Google Israel play in Google's global success?
Yeah, I think today it really plays a strategic role, a key role. Here are a few examples. I think on the first, I would say, if you look at what the R&D center in Google Israel is doing, you know, most of the large companies, they think about their core competency and they keep it close to their hearts, meaning close to their headquarters. Google, of course, the core competency is search. And the R&D center in Israel is one of the only R&D centers outside of Mountain View that actually works on search. And some of the most important search innovations in Google in the past decade came out from Israel. One example would be autocomplete. You know, when you type in a keyword and it's kind of trying to guess what you're typing. So that's from Israel. Another big example is, thank you. Another big example is, of course, the innovation center we have around maps and geo with the acquisition of Waze, which is kind of the poster child of a successful startup. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't go to the supermarket without turning on Waze, so I know what you're talking about. So for a long time, it was pretty much Silicon Valley and Israel in the world where there was this large concentration of startups. And now you have startups popping up in many, many different countries. As Google looks around the world today, what are some of the things that you're looking at Israel as a model for the development of these other ecosystems? What can other countries learn from Israel's success?
Yeah. I think, you know, I'd start with the trivial, and the trivial is, in the past, countries would think about their competitive advantage in terms of how much natural resources they have. You know, they have oil, they have gold, they have water, they have minerals. Now the economy is shifting towards a knowledge-based economy, a digital-based economy, an innovation-based economy. And it's really not about natural resources, it's about human resources. It's all about talent and how you nurture it and how you kind of promote it. So that's the basic. If you think about a few lessons I think you can learn from Israel, I would start, the first one is kind of counterintuitive. And it's all about the fact that innovation thrives in scarcity, not in abundance. So think about Israel, a small country, only 8 million people, gets into the size of Lake Michigan. But you talk to an Israeli entrepreneur, an Israeli startup, they think global from the first day because they can't focus only on the domestic market. It's simply not big enough, right? The other thing is diversity. Diversity, I think we share a lot between Israel and the US. When you think about Israel, it's a collection of people from different ethnic backgrounds, with different languages from all over the world. There's a lot of research that shows that diversity actually pushes the boundaries on innovation, and it's critical.
Actually, I think that more than half of the founders of startups in Silicon Valley are actually not native to the US.
Yeah,
which is
exactly,
a good point.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the third one, which is probably the most important one and the hardest one to get, Wendy, is all about culture, right? And I'm thinking of our late and great President Shimon Peres, who would say that the biggest thing that the Jewish people brought to this world is dissatisfaction.
Oh, that's great.
Dissatisfaction, right? And think how powerful that is, you know, because if you're discontent all the time, you're actually seeing problems all around you, and you're looking for solutions. That's a great start when you're an entrepreneur. And the last thing, and I promise I'll end with that about culture, is the importance of education. And, you know, 5,000 years of tradition of Am HaSefer, right? The people of the book. And of course, the role of the Jewish mother, which I think we have to be frank and talk about it. You know, the Jewish mother, initially it's kind of binary option on what kind of career the kids can take. You can be a doctor or a lawyer, and it's pretty much that. And in the past decade, the Jewish mother is more flexible, right. And she's accepting also PhDs in science and mathematics, which is really what's driving Startup Nation.
Right, that's fabulous. That's fabulous, thank you. So we're actually out of time, but in one sentence, what do you think needs to be done to ensure that Israel remains one of the tech leaders around the globe? Just
sure. I think, you know, if you look at it, we have only 8% of the workforce now in tech. And if we want to take it to the next level, we need to bring more. So tech should be 20% of the workforce, 30%. And for that, we need to include new segments and populations of the society. Think about more women, Orthodox, think about more Arab Israelis. We have to integrate all of them, and that will help us take Startup Nation to the next level.
Excellent. So there are clearly some challenges that need to be met in order to take this thing to the next level. And with that, you've painted one inspiring picture about what's going on the innovation scene, and I can only imagine what you're going to say about Israeli innovation the next time you take the AIPAC stage. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot.